meeting in the Mancroft room rather than the council chambers, so that's a novelty in itself.
Absolutely.
So let's just turn our attention to the agenda. Item 8, an award of a contract for security services at multi-storey car parks. That will come to a later cabinet meeting. Do we have any apologies?
Councillor Giles has apologised.
Councillor Giles. And do we have any declarations of interest? Gail and Beth?
Let's see if it works, shall we? Yeah, item 13, I'm a director of Norwich Preservation Trust, so I will withdraw from that part of the agenda.
Thank you. Beth?
I'm also on the Preservation Trust.
Okay, so we'll do the same thing. Excellent. Okay. Right, let's, have we got any public questions or petitions? I don't recall any being brought to my attention. Okay, let's go on to item 4, which is the minutes of our last meeting held on the 9th of March and the 6th of April. This was a bonus meeting of Cabinet. Can we agree those minutes as a true record? Yes?
Yes.
Yes. You're good. Okay.
Time honoured way.
Time honoured way. Okay. Right. Let's then go on to item 5. Very exciting work that's being done as part of the East Norwich Master Plan, and this is a report in the name of Councillor Stannard.
Thank you very much, Rita. This is really, really exciting, and I'm really pleased to be able to be presenting this report as we get to the next stage of the East Norwich development. So I'm going to give an overview of the report itself, just for clarity. And we've been joined also by Martin from the consultant team. We're very pleased to have you. I've never actually met you in person, so it's quite interesting. Yeah, you actually exist. You've got really good. And Julie is here. So just the background. The East Norwich sites are the deal ground utility sites in Carrow Works, and they're a once-in-a-generation regeneration opportunity for the city. And they have the potential to transform this part of the city and deliver wider benefits for Greater Norwich, as well as the wider region. There is 50 hectares of ground there, and I calculated that that's the equivalent of 70 to 80 football pitches, just to give you an idea of the scale of the site. So the purpose of the report is a further update to the Stage 1 Master Plan, which Cabinet has seen previously in November, and to present the Stage 2 outputs, which is really a refinement of the Stage 1 plan, which members are recommended to approve. Also, the preparation of the following documents, which members are recommended to endorse. There's a supplementary planning document, or SPD as it's known, an infrastructure delivery plan, IDP, and a delivery report. This conclusion of Stage 2 is the end of the current partnership funded commission. The report also sets out next steps to maintain momentum for the initiative. And colleagues will be aware that the City Council has been committed to maximising the regeneration potential of East Norwich for many years, but they are very complex sites, and the ownership is complex as well. So on the 10th of June, we presented a report to Cabinet highlighting the opportunity offered by the vacation of the Carrow Works site by Griffith Union to act as a catalyst for regeneration of these long-term vacant sites in East Norwich. Following a procurement exercise on the 10th of February, Cabinet resolved to award a contract for multidisciplinary professional advice on the master plan to consultant team Alison Young, and that includes Allies and Morrison master planners, Hydroc and RPS. The production of the master plan for East Norwich is required to support policy of the emerging Greater Norwich local plan. The draft plan was submitted to the Secretary of State in July 2021, identifying the East Norwich strategic regeneration area and allocating this area on this single strategic allocation for residential-led mixed-use development to include in the region of up to 4,000 new homes. And the master plan brief includes provision for a supplementary planning document for East Norwich to support the policy. It should be noted that the Sustainable Development Panel has been briefed as part of the master plan process. They were briefed on the 7th of March, and also earlier this week there was an informal meeting of members of the SD panel to which other councillors were invited, and there was an update in advance of this meeting. So stage 2 is entailed refinements to the master plan, and that's come out of extensive dialogue with partners, the steering group, the city and county officers, and key external stakeholders, including the Environment Agency, the NHS, the Clinical Commissioning Group, bus operators, and adjacent landowners. In addition, stage 2 outputs include a draft supplementary planning document, an infrastructure delivery plan, and delivery report, as I said. Now, this is being overseen overall by the East Norwich Partnership, and that's a public-private sector partnership led by the City Council, which I chair. And this is a really, really important forum. The purpose is for partners to work together in developing a master plan that's deliverable and will address the need for investment in substantial new social and economic infrastructure to unlock the development potential of the site, enabling sustainable growth. And the membership is ourselves, Norwich City Council, Norfolk County Council, South Norfolk Council, the Broads Authority, Homes England, Network Rail, New Anglia Local Enterprise Partnership, the landowners of the Deal Ground and Maygonie site, also Carroll Works and the utilities site. There's an awful lot of stakeholders and partners involved in this. There are also 4 landowners, and as I've said previously, it makes absolute sense for us to have a master plan for the whole site, which informs relevant planning policies, but also ensures that we can coordinate the delivery of the infrastructure across the whole site. What we could have seen is each of the 4 individual landowners going off and developing in their own way whatever they wanted to do. The reason they sit around the table with us is they recognise there is a benefit from us all working together on a coherent overall plan. So the purpose of the stage 1 was to provide a clear understanding of the development potential, looking at the constraints and opportunities, also on and off-site environmental, ecological, heritage, infrastructure and flooding factors, and it identified a range of appropriate land uses, including housing, employment and community and social infrastructure, and the strategic infrastructure required to deliver these elements. This is informed by a robust and comprehensive evidence base, and also an engagement process, and that involved very strong public engagement as well as engagement with all the partners and stakeholders. There's a longer list of stakeholders as well that we engage with. So details of that came to Cabinet in November, as I've said. The 3 primary strategic objectives for the project are very simple: celebrating Norwich's waterfront, connecting the city with the Broads, and framing the future with the past. And that concept, master plan, aimed to create characterful places that are responsive to the river location and to existing development at Trout, for example, and to create opportunities to enhance landscape setting. And it proposed 4 distinct character areas based on Carroll Works, with its industrial heritage and listed buildings, Trout Village and Deal Ground, which contains a significant amount of flood zone and open space, Waterside North, based on the utility site on the north bank of the Wensum, and Waterside East, which straddles the Wensum adjacent to Carroll Works and Norwich City Football Club. And the proposals in the master plan reflect the different characteristics of these areas, so it's sensitive in that sense. And key elements of the master plan from stage 1 were new strong pedestrian and cycle connections, all mode vehicular connections, bus routes, new marinas, a web of green spaces and public spaces, landscape, ecology and planting proposals, homes fronting open spaces and or the water, a land use strategy responding to the site's constraints, social and community infrastructure, and low to zero carbon energy solutions. So we now move on to stage 2. The stage 2 master plan hasn't really led to any significant variance in approach to stage 1. It's more of a refinement of the elements which were identified, and the key elements of focus are set out in the report. pedestrian, cyclist and emergency access and potential bus access. The opportunity for Trouse Rail Underpass being the pivotal point for key east-west pedestrian and cycle routes, bus routes, new marinas, green spaces in public realm, landscape ecology and planting proposals, homes fronting open spaces and or the water land use strategy, responding to sites constraints, social and community infrastructure, and once again low zero carbon energy. And the report sets out the relevant issues around there where there's been some refinement. The key stages from stage 1 to stage 2 can be grouped under 4 main headings of access and movement, heritage, land use and ecology, and that's summarised in the report, paragraphs 27 onwards. Stage 2 master plan can deliver, as a scheme, around 3,632 residential units with 33% affordable housing and 507,000 square feet of commercial floor space, enabling at least 4,100 jobs to be provided. Affordable residential units are assumed to be 85% for social rent and 15% for shared ownership, which is in line with the policy adopted in the Joint Core Strategy. The Stage 2 summary master plan is attached for you to see, and I'm sure you have already, and it's also contained within the SPP. So we've got a draft supplementary planning document as one of the key outputs. You can see that that's in Appendix 3, and that sets out objectives and guidance to provide a framework for the future development of the site. It's also important for taking a comprehensive view of the East Norwich area as a whole and ensuring that development and its infrastructure are delivered holistically, which is something I've already referred to. So Cabinet is being asked to endorse the draft SPD at this stage, but recognising that this will be a material planning consideration for relevant planning applications in view of the level of work, consultation and engagement with the key agencies and partners that has taken place over the course of the project and the SPD's development. And then final adoption by the Council and its partner local authorities can't take place until there's been a further round of statutory consultation. And it needs to be allied to progress on the GNLP. But when all of that happens and when it's been fully accepted and adopted, it will be a material planning consideration. The infrastructure delivery plan, I've mentioned the importance of coherent infrastructure, but that's physical and social, necessary to support new development on the East Norwich site. You can see that at page 4. The report notes again that it's a 50-hectare site, which is very large. It's bisected by 2 rivers and a railway line, and the physical infrastructure requirements are considerable. They include 4 bridges, 2 underpass improvements, significant on-site and off-site highway and connectivity works, flood mitigation works, which is being informed by additional flood modelling work funded by Homes England, and potential marinas. There's an awful lot there that needs to be coordinated. So the infrastructure delivery plan identifies the sum of £153 million in infrastructure costs and a total of £225 million for all infrastructure and as normal costs is required. For the East Norwich area or a wider sub-regional benefit, this needs to be provided to underpin regeneration of East Norwich, and the future aspect of stage 3 work will be to further establish where and how equitable apportionment of infrastructure costs can be made, where infrastructure is of more than a site benefit. And I guess you might think part of that, an example might be the social infrastructure, say the school, for example. So there's a delivery report also set out in the report, and there's a link to that, and that's been prepared to assess matters such as phasing funding and provide a baseline for how to implement the development. The high-level strategic viability assessment across all East Norwich sites indicates the significant challenges to fully deliver the high-quality, sustainable and suitably connected urban regeneration of the sites. The report states that it would be possible for the scheme to generate a profit equating to 15% on gross development value or GDV by funding all of the £153 million of infrastructure-related costs by public sector grant. And it also makes a point that notes that this indicative level of subsidy aligns with other Homes England funded projects in the context of the wider scheme benefits and jobs created. In other words, they've not been put off, they've not held up their hands in horror, it's a quantum that they're used to working with, even though it sounds like an awful lot of money. So each of, just looking quickly at the Greater Norwich Local Plan, each of these deliverables have been submitted to the examination to assist the inspectors in considering their assessment for the allocation and accompanying policy for future development of these Norwich sites. So the next steps is where we include Homes England as a national agency, the delivery of new homes and communities, and also supporting large-scale housing-led urban regeneration, is ramping up its resourcing support to assist the City Council and the wider partnership in maintaining momentum. So they're going to be much more proactive from now on. Through Homes England funding, likely to be in the region of £100,000, a formal stage 3 exercise will be taken as a deep dive into matters related to development mechanisms, timing and phasing, trigger points of delivery, and critically, viability. And funding also, of course, as I mentioned, to assist with the delivery of key infrastructure and affordable housing. The City Council will provide project management during this next stage and additional technical input into the next stage of the work, with the partnership kept advised of ongoing work. And it's hoped that a Homes England procurement for this exercise can commence in July, so that's next month. So hopefully, if this is approved today, that will be what happens next. So you've got the report, you've got all the background papers, you've got the recommendations, which I've gone through and highlighted, so I hope that's clear. And as I say, I commend this to you. It's incredibly exciting. We're creating a new district of the city, and we're working really hard to get it right in terms of all those factors that I mentioned.
Excellent presentation and report, Mike. Thank you very much. So if I take questions, Judith, Martin, have you any other points you want to add at this stage? No? Okay, thanks very much. Cabinet colleagues, any points anybody wants to raise? I certainly know that Homes England, civil servant visits, so on, recognise this as a major opportunity, as I think does the community. And I know there's been extensive and highly transparent consultation and discussion with residents, and that will continue through the process and all the different aspects that come forward. If, and I expect we will agree today, moving this forward to drive it along. Okay, so no cabinet members. Yes, Gail.
If I can make a comment, I just think it's a really interesting report, and thanks for the presentation, Mike. I mean, I think there's nothing to beat actually going out on site and seeing the enormity of what is ahead of us. But it is exciting, and there's so many possibilities. So, it's getting everyone around the table to work together is the way forward. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yes, I suspect we'll be making site visits as things continue to progress. Lucy, do you have a question?
Thank you. I do, yeah. It's really great to see the level of ambition from the City Council to deliver all that low carbon housing, biodiversity net gain, renewable energy on the site, and reduce those in-area emissions, save residents money, and this really carefully works out plan. So I just wanted to say it's really great to see that. Thank you. I wanted to ask a question. We've for years talked about how planning policy needs to be tightened in terms of those things, renewable energy, low carbon homes, flood mitigation, biodiversity, and we've often heard that the review of our development management policies will address that. Our DMs, and the review was postponed, as far as I understand, because of government overhauling the planning system, and those plans seem to have now been scaled back by government. Given that there are huge projects like this East Norwich Master Plan coming down the line, and we're clearly committed to making the most of them, will we be finally reviewing our DM policies to make sure that the aspirations can be delivered on the ground?
That's a really important point, and a really good question. I'm going to defer to Graham to see how the defer. I don't put any hostages to fortune for you, Graham.
Well, I'm not sure I will have a definitive answer, because some circumstances you described, we always, development management policies was adopted a few years ago further to the joint core strategy being adopted as the overarching strategic plan. So it's always been the intention that following the adoption of the Greater Norwich Liverpool plan, we would bring forward a review of development management policies. The government announced they were going to radically overhaul the planning system, that planning white paper that came out a couple of years ago, and have backtracked an element of that in more recent announcements in the level of white paper. We are still proposed further amendment to planning legislation that we're not quite clear on, and they're still talking about further simplifying the amount and standardising guidelines in relation to development management policy. So my expectation would be that following the Greater Norwich Local Plan's adoption, or ideally shortly in advance of that, we would be in a position to commence the review of the development management policies. If we get more clarity from government about the direction of the development planning system, can't confirm that that will be the case.
Okay. Anything, Martin, anything that you'd like to add? How are you getting on with working for us and working with us on this project?
It's doing very, very well.
Yes, I knew that was the answer.
I being so bold to say that. No, I think that one of the big points I suppose to underline is, from all the work we've done, all the technical work, is that where we've got to is hopefully a really good balance of pragmatism in terms of how we can deliver, given all of the fantastic opportunities which sometimes are described as constraints of the sites, but also getting to a point where we really understand that delivery challenge and that financial one. I think, Councillor Sono, you made the point about the sum of money. I think what's really interesting is, and to sort of make that point today, is if you break that back per house, home, I'll use homes and all houses, about 60% of flats, that actually comes out with a figure that is easily commensurate to what we're seeing in other schemes, not even big brownfield regeneration schemes, about £40-something thousand per dwelling. That doesn't value the jobs, that doesn't put a price on those. So actually that's why Homes England are still in the conversation, because they see that figure as really, not too scary. When you say 150 million, it sounds a lot of money, it is a lot of money, but when you put it to what you're actually achieving for that, I think it comes back to a more manageable conversation. I think that would be the thing that I've taken away from the last 14 months of working with everyone on the project is we've got the landowners around the table, we've got all the parties to make it happen. And hopefully the next phase of work that you embark on, I hope to be with us, but if not, I hope it's gets you to where you need to be.
Oh, thank you. It's very, very good to have your perspective on this. Judith, anything you wanted to add at all? No, I mean it's a marvellous project to be involved in. I have to say, really good, and it's very good to have a strong positive relationship with Homes England. And of course, we're looking at thousands of jobs and thousands of homes out of this, much needed, both of them. Okay, so we've had the discussion. There's a series of recommendations. Can we take them? Yes. Can we take them all together? That would be very helpful. They're on page 15, 1 to 5. So, colleagues, if you could indicate whether you support those recommendations. Excellent. So that's agreed. Thank you very much, and thank you for your attendance. Right, let's go on to page 91, which is update on health, safety and compliance in council homes and buildings. Councillor Harris.
Just look if you can get comfortable.
Of course. Welcome, Vivian.
Thank you. The report is a recommendation is to note the reports. It's an update on health, safety and compliance in council homes and buildings. It's in fact our second quarterly report after self-reporting ourselves to the regulator of social housing last July. The regulator for social housing found that Norwich City Council breached the home standard and published a regulatory notice. However, it is important to note that the RSH did not feel it necessary to take any enforcement action against Norwich City Council because they have confidence in our plans to improve services and return to full compliance. This report clearly sets out the compliance improvement plan and shows the considerable progress that has been made, with a number of tables on pages 93 to 98 to back this up. Where necessary, additional contractors have been procured to undertake specific areas of work, and as mentioned in paragraph 21, when we were concerned about the accuracy of the fire risk assessment data relating to our low-risk buildings, we initiated a full re-inspection programme, thus the increase in the outstanding inspections which has been reported. Again, the RSH is aware and is satisfied with the approach that we have taken. Work is also underway to map the compliance responsibilities on the high priority general fund assets. A separate compliance dashboard for general fund assets is in the process of being developed. There might be questions about specific items within the report, and we will do our best to answer those. The important thing to remember is that we are on a journey, and we are certainly moving in the right direction. We are working closely with the regulator of social housing, and at the regular monthly meetings, they are satisfied with the progress being made and the arrangements that are in place. Officers might well want to add to my very brief summary, and I have to thank them for all their work and support that they've given. Thank you.
Thank you. Vivian, anything to add?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As Councillor Harris has said, this is the second quarterly update in relation to compliance matters, which was reported to the Cabinet in November, and the first report to you was in February 2022. We said it would take 12 months to reach compliance and a further 6 to 12 months to fully embed improvements in all our systems and processes. Since the last update in February, good progress has been made in achieving the immediate actions in our improvement plan. In summary, gas safety and lifts has remained fully compliant. All communal electrical safety checks have been completed. Good progress has been made in completing electrical tests and outstanding remedial works in domestic properties following the appointment of additional contracting capacity. Fire risk assessments for all high-risk residential buildings have been completed with only a small number of remedial works outstanding. Water hygiene safety testing has commenced in residential properties and progress is being made. Work has continued to validate the data through checks and further assessments. Therefore, some figures have changed as the position has become clearer. Fire risk assessments have commenced on outstanding general fund non-housing properties, and work is underway to map compliance responsibilities on the high priority general fund non-housing assets. So our next steps are as follows. You're all aware that we transferred the asset management and compliance function from MPSN to the Council on the 1st of April. And we're now developing a service improvement programme to go alongside the other work that we're doing on compliance. A training programme is being developed to increase skills and knowledge in the team. Additional contractor capacity has been procured, and these contracts will be starting to address the remaining outstanding works. All compliance policies and procedures will be reviewed to ensure they're up to date and in accordance with best practice, and consultation and information to tenants and leaseholders continues. As you're aware, we proactively referred ourselves to the regulator of social housing and have continued to work closely with them, meeting them on a monthly basis. They have suggested we enter into a voluntary undertaking which confirms the steps we're planning to take to achieve full compliance. This voluntary undertaking is expected to be put in place very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vivian. Any questions or comments from Cabinet members?
Pleased to see the progress that's been made.
Good. Yeah, there's momentum behind the programme. Lucy?
Thank you, yes. We were assured from the beginning that action to put into it would be a priority of the Council, and we support that wholeheartedly still. There are a few concerning things though. It's a year since issues were first spotted and reported, July 2021, almost a year. And we were informed in November. It seems to be taking a long time to put things right. And obviously safety of tenants is at stake. It's clear there's a plan in place, but I'd ask really on page 100, you can see that there's a significant, well, a huge underspend here in this year's approved funding. So we're only spent, by my calculations, a fifth of the allocated budget for the year. Now that must be linked to actual progress made. So that means we've made a fifth of the progress. So we're on a journey, as Gail said, in the right direction, but progress seems incredibly slow. And I have to point that out. There's quite a few other smaller points and questions I could ask, and I will pick up with you perhaps outside this meeting. But I just say, do you think that, are you satisfied with the rate of progress, given that that's not reflected in what's been spent?
Yes, Vivian, did you want to pick that up?
I think, as it explains in the report, that there was a lot of initial work that we had to do to build the programme. And because obviously our services were outsourced to Norse at the time, accessing information to enable us to build the programme at some time, in some stages was delayed and a little bit difficult. The reality is that we had to secure contractors to bring them in to carry out the necessary works. And that takes time because we obviously need to follow the appropriate route in terms of procurement. And we have been working at that, and we have now, I think, got a really strong foundation on which to build the programme and to gather momentum and move forward from this point.
Lou, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. If I could just add to the comments that Vivian's made, we have reported and mentioned earlier that we meet with the regulator on a monthly basis, and our progress is absolutely in line with their expectations of the kind of scale of the issue that we were facing, and so we're reassured by that. They're comfortable with the progress we're making.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I tried to illustrate that as well in my introduction. We are working really closely with the regulator. They are satisfied with the progress we're making. I understand where Councillor Galvin is coming from, because she probably knows that I can be quite impatient as well, and sometimes I would like things to move quicker, but there is a process. We have to get the contractors in place. But as you can see from the various contractors we have appointed, when we find a need, we are appointing them, and we're not holding back, but we still have to go through the process of finding them. So things do take time. There is no other way around it. And I think, you know, the transparency we're reporting this with shows the amount of work that has gone into it so far, and we are making definite progress. But it has been a challenge, because the new IT system will help us enormously as well, because that will help us to follow the trail through to compliance.
I think one of the compelling points is the external validation by the social housing regulator, because they will hold us to the commitments we've made and the pace at which they expect us to address the issues that were scooped, and that's one of the reasons why you picked up that point earlier on, Councillor Galvin, about being told at a particular point in time, well, the work had to be done to scoop actually the scale of what had to be tackled, and that was then going to inform the programme, and then there was the opportunity for members to understand the full ramifications. Any further questions, comments? Well, we're asked to note the report. Can we do that, please? Please indicate. Thank you very much. Let's now go on to page 105. This is Contaminated Land Inspection Strategy, and in the name of Councillor Jones.
Thank you. Certainly Norwich, like everywhere else, every other town and city across the country, has a legacy of contaminated land from historical unregulated industrial activities. And whilst our city has benefited over the years from, be that tanning, shoemaking, brewing and so many other industries, it has left its mark. So this report is requesting a consultation on the draft Contaminated Land Strategy, which I'd say the strategy is largely prescribed by government guidance, and it's to address a list of potential sites across the city that are graded by risk and which are suspected of being contaminated. The document is an update and will continue the work of both inspection and remediation. It's important to note this strategy does not sit in isolation and that there's much work in other areas, so crossovers includes things like the planning process. So following consultation, the request is to delegate powers to update the strategy and adopt that. But given some of the technical nature of the report, I will hand over to Sarah to see if she's got anything else to add.
Thanks very much, Beth, and over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor James. I don't have anything to add, but I will attempt to answer any questions that others may have on any of the very slightly more technical details that will help to yourself.
Thank you very much. Any Cabinet colleagues got any technical questions or other more general questions? No? Okay. Lucy, you have an interest in contaminated land, I'm sure?
Yeah. I do remember in one planning application they found when they did some core samples that they were filled up with trimmings and leather boots. Which is interesting.
What lies beneath?
Yeah. One of the stated aims of the strategy is to bring contaminated land back into beneficial use by voluntary remediation partnership, and we're really happy to hear this, obviously. As a community group, we know of previously faced blocks in their effort to put an abandoned plot of land on Norwich Street, actually, to community gardens. There are multiple sites like that across the city, and we have limited capacity as a council to help everyone to bring them into use. Is there going to be a process which could be followed to determine the order in which they'll be considered and looked at, excluding those that pose a risk to human health? Will any priority be given to individuals or groups who wish to take on land for beneficial use? And what resources will be available to ensure that those sites can be looked at quickly and dealt with appropriately? Because often groups want to come forward at a certain time. Is that in any way? Thank you.
At this point, in short, it's not. So this strategy effectively sets out how we're going to deal with those highest risk sites first, because they do pose the risk, as I say, to human health, and that's set out in the report, and they should essentially be our priority. A number of those may already be being proposed for remediation through the planning process. We are aware of other sites where there is a kind of community group interest, potentially in using other sites. The issue is potentially looking at the extent of the remediation and the cost of it, and particularly in that kind of that site that you're referencing, I'm aware that the remediation cost would have been quite excessive. I think there is also some remediation planned through the planning process. I think those costs came out quite expensive, so would therefore probably be prohibitive for us to intervene as a council. But I can have a conversation with you and provide you more information about that offline. In terms of resources moving forward, so that's kind of the second stage of looking at this. I think it's important we get a strategy adopted and then resources to deliver it, although we are looking at getting a contaminated land expert back in the team following something we have a method team ready to progress this. We've also got consultants coming in the interim to start moving these forward and addressing some of those high risk sites.
Okay, thank you. Very helpful answer. Right, no further comments. So this is a delegated recommendation to the Executive Director of Development in consultation. No, I'm looking at the wrong one. Sorry, I'm looking at my own report. So I'll be well prepared for that when we finally get to it. Okay.
Wishful thinking.
It's wishful thinking. My life is whistling away. Page 105. So we've got recommendations, and there's a consultation exercise which I think is useful. And there's a delegated authority to the Director of Development, City Services, with the portfolio holder, which is Beth. Can we agree that recommendation? Thank you very much. Okay. So we have no item 8, so we go on to item 9. This is the report around the bidding, competitive environment for the Levelling Up Fund. and people will be familiar with the language of levelling up. And if I turn to page 130, that just gives a little bit of context. So there's been £4.8 billion set aside for this, for what's described as high-value local infrastructure. I think I'm right in saying, Ellen, that 1.6 billion has already been allocated to that 4.8 for the first priority groups.
Yes.
I think so, yes. I'm not entirely sure it's bigger, but it's around that amount.
Yeah, so this process is underway, and Norwich, against criteria, falls into the second group, and that's what we're considering today. So getting us, a government wants as much bang for its buck as it can get out of this, and wants some sort of significant impacts of the investment, as do we, of course, and that's the reason, looking at our corporate plan, our priorities, why we have entered the field. Local authorities can submit one bid for every MP. We have 2 MPs, and we are acting as the lead bidder for Norwich North and Norwich South, and that can mean submitting bids up to £40 million in total, 20 million per constituency area. So the sums of money are significant, and there are clearly costs to the council in preparing that work, but also it's a very tight timetable. So it's a tight timetable to get the submissions in by the 6th of July, and the money has to be spent within effectively a 2-year time frame. So our local MPs for Norwich North and Norwich South have as it were, a stake in this, a voice in this process. So they are part of that. And as it says, this is something which is being subject to work with a number of internal officers, external stakeholders over the last in the spring, March and April 2022. Because it is competitive, we can't talk about the projects above the line. These are below the line, because that will only be revealed once we have the closing date for submissions to go to government. And it's clear, page 132 onwards, is that there are high expectations, there are high thresholds that government is expecting bids and propositions to fall within. So it's about place, it's about strategic fit, and a lot of this is about adding value to existing investments. So, for example, the Towns deal is referenced here. How can we add value to funding that we've already received? It's about some of those key issues that are central to the work of this council, about delivering, for example, net zero carbon emissions, improving equality, ties in with a whole series of other funds. There's work currently being done on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund as well. So this landscape is kind of part of the context with which the bids that go in will be assessed. And it's about an economic case. What are the benefits? What's the public value? And deliverability. A confidence that we have in place the kind of management, infrastructure and delivery plans that can hit these very tight timetables. And civil servants, ministers will look at different ways of assessing the bids that we put in, cutting across not just specific areas but also thematically, regeneration, town centre, transport, culture, heritage and so on. And it's also about a fair spread across the country, so we're working within a wider landscape. So We've had to put additional resources into this. Our past experience of the successful Towns Fund bid was first of all having strong partnerships, but also expertise, and so resources have been allocated to provide that support and that expertise to give our bids a fair wind. So there are revenue costs to these programmes, and we have to take account of that. A lot of this is essentially capital money. That's been the feature also of the Towns deal. And if I take you to the final page of the report, paragraph 31, we do see it as a major opportunity to drive regeneration, improve amenities for the city and its people. And I said already that it builds on existing investments, and it ties in very much with the Norwich 2040 vision, so it has a very strong endorsement with our partners and stakeholders as part of those partnership relationships, including a whole range of organisations across the city. So there's great ambition to bid for this money, but I suppose the stress I have to make is that the expectation is that you're looking at large projects of up to £20 million, and understanding that it's got to be impactful, and it's got to work against the criteria that we have been provided with in terms of the bidding. And I would thank now the officers who are working on this, because it's a very tight timetable, and frankly coming on the back of the very tight timetable for the Towns deal as well, which is still in progress. It's a tremendous endeavour by officers of this authority and key partners as well. Ellen, did you want to add any points to my comments?
Just really stressing that it does represent a fantastic opportunity for the city, but we have to manage expectations as a priority 2 area that we might not be successful, because most of the money in the first round certainly went to priority 1 areas. But I think we have 3 potentially really strong projects, and we can make a real step change with them in the both community facilities that we're offering, and also step change in sort of city centre vitality, boosting visitor numbers, boosting footfall, that kind of thing, which is hitting the mark in terms of the strategic goals of the fund. It's a very, very challenging timetable, and it's fair to say that that timetable really suits projects that are already partially in development. You can't kind of pluck something out of fresh air and have a full business case in 3 months. They've suited projects where there's been some critical thinking and preparatory work done beforehand, and therefore it's sort of taken things that were maybe partially developed or in a pipeline waiting for funding opportunities.
Thank you very much, and I think that's a really helpful insight into how we've been able to prepare against a very tight timetable from work that's been underway or has been developed as part of other key projects. So we've got a below the line report to this as well, but I'll take comments on the above the line reports. Are there any points that anybody wants to raise on this? Okay, Lucy, yes, I was going to come to you, Lucy. Would you like to make any points?
I have a question, and I thank you for all the hard work, and I'm really glad that we've got the ambition as a city to do this, and I understand the timescale, and I understand that we want to be successful, and understand how much hard work it is, so thanks for that. It does make it very clear in the report that an important element of the bidding process is to demonstrate stakeholder involvement in the selection of the bids and support for bids, and local engagement via stakeholder letters or similar, which will significantly strengthen a bid. It also details how the council arrived at the shortlist via internal and external stakeholder support. At no point, however, will councillors, especially ward representatives of wards that will cover bid areas, which we won't speak about above the line, but no one was involved in working up a long or a short list. And this does undermine local engagement from the start. We feel it also means that knowledge about potential for local engagement and support, which could help strengthen this and could even tip the balance, could be missed out. So I'd like to know why there wasn't, or hope perhaps to be assured that in the future workshops for councillors to input into processes like this might be considered and built in.
Could I, so I'm going to, on the back of Lucy's question, just put the point that in the work that we've done to get to the, well, we'll be working up to the deadline for these bids, that we have satisfactorily covered the stakeholder engagement that's needed to satisfy government, that we have scooped that fully.
I think that the workshops that we had with say both internal and external stakeholders, as I said before, the timetable very much favours projects that were already kind of in the pipeline, and therefore the things that have come forward and that have scored most strongly on the sort of assessment criteria that we used to create the shortlist were things that were already being worked up, and therefore that there had already been a fair degree of engagement with public on. I'll give an example of the sort of, I can't talk about the projects at this stage, but I mean, many of the stakeholders that we consulted hadn't got projects that were at a sufficient stage of maturity really to be realistically delivered within the time frame, or to produce a business case even within the time frame that we were looking at. So they were all, I think it's fair to say, projects that were already being developed in the pipeline, and therefore that there'd been a degree of consultation with the public and other stakeholders to get them to where they were.
And we had used the model, of course, of the Towns deal, which was highly successful.
Can I just add to that?
You can, Graham.
At the moment, we're being driven by what is a very tight timetable and a largely technical process. Should we, of course, be successful through that process and get the money, then actually there will be scope for further engagement with communities affected, local members in the area about precisely how those individual schemes and projects will be taken forward and delivered. A number of them still have regulatory processes to go through, aspects of design to be worked up. So it's not that although the process about selection has been driven through a wider assessment of things that are effectively in the pipeline and capable of being worked up to maximise the chances of getting the funding. Should the funding be successfully obtained, there is still scope for further engagement and shaping its precise delivery.
Yes, I suppose the last point I would make is of course outlined in para 31. You know, it's a reflection in terms of going for this funding of the work that we've done in relation to Norwich 2040, which has been subject to very, very wide consultation across the whole network, not just stakeholders as organisations, but residents and their ambitions for their city, and also a reflection of the corporate plan, which, well, I think the administration supported the corporate plan at the Budget Council. So in that sense, it has the strongest endorsements. And what I would like to do is, first of all, just in terms of moving this forward, is whether any cabinet members wish to go below the line on this before I take the above the line recommendations. Are we okay with that? So having said that, we can now go to the recommendations on page 129, and so that's a delegation, Executive Director of Development and City Services, in consultation with myself as leader of the council, to submit the Levelling Up Fund. And we had to take this report to this meeting, because if we were waiting to the next meeting, we'd passed the deadline. So there's still work to do. People will be working up to the wire on this, hence the importance of the delegation. Can we indicate whether we support that? Thank you. Okay, that's agreed. Right, well, we do now go below the line, so that ends the public part of this this meeting. Thank you for people who have been watching. Go below the line. All those in favour?